Good day. We often compartmentalize human actions, categorizing them as individual cruelty or large-scale conflict, seemingly disparate phenomena with little in common. But what if we were to explore the underlying currents of human behavior that might manifest in wildly different forms? Today, we embark on an admittedly abstract and perhaps uncomfortable intellectual journey. We will consider two seemingly unrelated phenomena: the insidious psychological torture known as Chinese water torture and the sustained missile attacks emanating from Yemen towards Israel. At first glance, these could not be more different. One is a calculated, often clandestine act of individual torment, while the other is a highly visible, geopolitical act of aggression. Yet, by examining them through a philosophical lens, we might uncover shared psychological threads that speak to the endurance of suffering, the intent to destabilize, and the potential for a relentless application of pressure, whether on an individual mind or a national psyche. We are not suggesting a direct causal link, nor are we equating the moral gravity of these situations. Instead, we propose to use them as extreme case studies. Can the agonizing drip, drip, drip of water designed to erode mental fortitude offer any abstract insights into the prolonged and unsettling impact of sustained, albeit often intermittent, missile fires? Can the intent behind each, to inflict a specific kind of suffering, to create a state of persistent anxiety, reveal something fundamental about the human capacity of inflicting and enduring protracted forms of pressure? This is not about finding easy answers, but about asking difficult questions. It's about using these starkly contrasting realities to probe the deeper aspects of human behavior under duress, and the psychology of attrition, and the potential for seemingly small, repetitive actions to accumulate into significant psychological or strategic effects. Let us then delve into this exploration, acknowledging the sensitivity of the topics by approaching them with a spirit of intellectual inquiry, seeking not to equate, but to understand. Chinese water torture. The core mechanism is the relentless, unending application of a seemingly minor irritant that over time erodes the victim's psychological defenses. It's about the cumulative effect of persistent, low-level torment. Prolonged missile attacks. While far more physically destructive, the sustained nature of these attacks can create a state of constant anxiety, disruption, and fear within the targeted population. The unpredictability and the ongoing threat can have a similar eroding effect on societal well-being and psychological security. So, what is then the philosophical conclusion that we can draw from these two concepts? Both scenarios highlight a human capacity to inflict prolonged distress, whether on an individual or a collective, through persistent and potentially unpredictable means. This speaks to a potential human tendency to exploit vulnerabilities through sustained pressure rather than immediate, overwhelming force. Chinese water torture. The torturer holds absolute power over the restrained victim, creating a situation of utter helplessness. This power dynamic is crucial for the effectiveness of the torture. Prolonged missile attacks. While the power dynamic between Yemen and Israel is complex and debated, the ability of one actor to repeatedly project force onto another, even if the damage is limited, demonstrates a certain level of power projection and the vulnerability of the target. And so, how can we draw philosophical conclusions from these two? Both situations illustrate how an imbalance of power can be exploited to inflict suffering or exert influence. The actor with more relative power can impose their will or cause distress through sustained action. Chinese water torture. The torturer might become desensitized to the victim's suffering over time, viewing the slow dripping as a mere procedure rather than an act of intense cruelty. For those orchestrating or even observing the prolonged conflict from a distance, there might be a gradual desensitization to the human cost and the ongoing fear experienced by the targeted population. The repetitive nature of the events can lead to a diminished sense of urgency or empathy. And the philosophical conclusions that we can draw from both of these scenarios raise questions about the human capacity for desensitization to the suffering of others, especially when the infliction of that suffering becomes repeated or seemingly an abstract act. Chinese water torture. The primary damage is psychological, leaving a lasting trauma even if physical wounds are minimal. The feeling of helplessness and the constant anticipation of the next drop can be deeply scarring. While there is physical destruction and loss of life, the constant threat and the disruption of daily life can have significant and long-lasting psychological consequences for the affected population, leading to anxiety, stress, and trauma. And so, the philosophical conclusions that we can draw are that both situations underscore that the impact of harmful actions extends beyond immediate physical damage to deeply affect the mental and emotional well-being of individuals and societies. And so, by engaging in this kind of philosophical comparison, we can potentially identify what is really happening in this war of attrition, what is actually not being told to you by the media. This broader understanding might then inform you the free individual, a completely sovereign in their ability to draw their own conclusions about the geopolitical events that seemingly at face value might be very difficult to understand, but now, when given a wider scale of intellectual prowess, suddenly becomes a much more sound concept for understanding. We here at the Swan Council, a geopolitical think tank subsidiary of the Magian Order of Constantinople, are proud to invite you to future deep dives into the real happenings in the world of geopolitics. Thank you.